And we have breaking news now at 10. A federal jury finds rapper Sean Kingston and his mother guilty on all charges in their fraud trial. The pair accused of acquiring luxury items but scheming never to pay for them. The artist, whose real name is Sean Anderson, left the courtroom tonight without speaking to reporters. He'll be on house arrest until sentencing. His mother, Janice Turner, was not with him. She was immediately taken into custody after the verdict, with the judge citing her past criminal history and role in the scheme as key factors in his decision. Their sentencing is scheduled for July 11th.
Sean Kingston stood by in absolute silence as his mother was taken away in handcuffs. The courtroom seemed to freeze in that moment. Nobody dared move or speak. A hush fell over the spectators, and all one could hear was the rustle of papers and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Kingston, once a chart-topping artist with a unique Jamaican-American sound, now stood on the brink of losing everything. How did it get to this point? Not long ago, his songs dominated radio stations around the world, and his distinctive voice turned him into an overnight success story. Yet the sad truth is that the same voice that once sang about beautiful girls is now overshadowed by courtroom drama and scandal. The very name that once lit up music charts is being discussed in legal briefs and somber news reports about wire fraud. The most shocking part isn't just that Kingston is facing up to 20 years in prison per charge, it's that he stands accused alongside his own mother. The mother-son duo allegedly orchestrated a $1 million scheme involving luxury cars, designer watches, and high-end gadgets they never paid for. Their sentencing is set for July 11, 2025, and everyone watching can't help but wonder, is this the final chapter for Sean Kingston, or just another twist in a life full of ups and downs? Long before the headlines labeled him a fraudster, Sean Kingston was simply Keyshawn Anderson, a kid whose life was marked by uncertainty and adversity. Growing up between Jamaica and the United States, he faced challenges that no child should ever have to endure. Periods of homelessness meant sleeping in cars, scraping together change for basic meals, and never knowing when or where his family might find stability. Worse still, legal trouble seemed like an unwanted family tradition. His mother, Janice Turner, already had run-ins with the law. When Kingston was just a teenager, she was incarcerated for identity fraud, leaving him to navigate a world that seemed determined to knock him down. It was during that time Kingston himself caught a breaking and entering charge at age 11, 21 days in juvenile detention, and a stint in boot camp. Nothing about his early environment pointed to a bright future, yet a spark of ambition kept him pushing forward. Living in turmoil either makes or breaks a person, and for Kingston, it eventually fueled his dream of a music career. Talent, combined with a stroke of luck, thrust him into the public eye. But the very beginnings of his life foreshadowed the complex relationship he had with money, family ties, and the law. Even as a youngster, he watched the justice system tear his family apart. Little did he know it would happen again, on a far more public and humiliating stage. Even after his mother's incarceration, the tight-knit bond between them endured through letters, late-night phone calls, and emotional visits. Those moments highlighted a dynamic that was equal parts love and vulnerability, which would eventually shape how Kingston viewed both loyalty and risk. Some believe these early experiences with legal battles laid a shaky foundation that influenced his decisions later in life. Everything changed the day a recording engineer stumbled upon Kingston's early YouTube videos. For a kid who grew up amid chaos, that discovery felt like a lottery ticket. Signed to Beluga Heights Records in 2007, he was suddenly in major label territory. The single Beautiful Girls exploded across the globe, capturing the carefree spirit of summer and cementing his reputation as the next big thing. Critics praised his blend of Jamaican dancehall and American pop, a fresh crossover that filled a gap in mainstream music. The success was almost instant, and for a brief period, Kingston lived the dream every aspiring artist fantasizes about. He toured, collaborated with massive stars, and banked more money than he had ever imagined seeing in a lifetime. It was a remarkable shift from the instability of his younger years, and fans worldwide latched onto his story of perseverance. But the dizzying heights of fame can vanish as fast as they come. Kingston's subsequent albums, Tomorrow in 2009 and Back to Life in 2013, underperformed, barely making ripples on the charts. Pop music tastes shifted, and his name gradually slipped from the public's consciousness. By the time the industry moved on, his once booming career seemed to stall, a perfect storm setting him up for a financial downfall that would lead to something far more dramatic than a fading music career. Industry insiders later revealed that Kingston's team struggled to secure consistent promotional support, and his personal spending habits raised eyebrows behind the scenes. Lavish parties, luxury cars, and sudden cancellations of shows contributed to a growing sense that the money was running thin. Though no one could predict the scale of his eventual legal troubles, the warning signs were flashing long before they made headlines. To the outside world, Kingston still appeared to be living large in a luxe South Florida mansion, flaunting jewels and top-tier vehicles. But behind the scenes, something far darker was brewing. In May 2024, law enforcement staged a full-blown raid on that very mansion, kicking down doors and announcing the arrests of both Kingston and his mother on fraud charges. This was no mere rumor. SWAT teams don't show up for petty misunderstandings. Investigators alleged that Kingston and Janice had set up fake wire transfers and forged documents to acquire over $1 million worth of extravagant goods. They didn't settle for small-ticket items either. High-end vehicles, jaw-dropping jewelry, state-of-the-art home theater systems. Nothing was off-limits. According to the prosecution, they would promise sellers that money was en route, only to ghost them once the goods were delivered. What stunned many was Kingston's willingness to leverage his fame for deceit. Court documents say he name-dropped Justin Bieber, once a collaborator, to assure businesses that the transactions were legit. One home entertainment company was told he and Bieber were business partners, persuading them to install a $150,000 system he never intended to pay for. In the eyes of the law, it was a textbook case of using star power to con unsuspecting victims. The aftermath of the raid was immediate and brutal. Local news outlets ran stories showing footage of tactical teams storming the property, which fueled online speculation about how someone with Kingston's fame had fallen so far. Rumors circulated that he'd been hemorrhaging money for years, paying off old debts with new scams. The carefully curated image of success collapsed in real time. By March 2025, a Broward County jury found Kingston and his mother guilty of 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 4 counts of wire fraud. Their deliberation took a mere 3 hours, a time frame that spoke volumes about the strength of the evidence. Among the incriminating pieces were 33 fake wire transfer receipts, each meticulously created to prove money had been sent for goods that were never properly paid for. Witness testimonies carried as much weight as the receipts themselves. A Fort Lauderdale jeweler recounted how Kingston provided screenshots of a non-existent bank transfer for a $285,000 Audemars Piguet watch. The jeweler had been promised not just payment, but also future business connections with other big-name celebrities. In the end, all he got was career damage. He lost his job, his credibility, and that 6-figure watch. The prosecution played audio recordings where Kingston could be heard instructing his mother to fake receipts so they could keep stalling their victims. The revelations were relentless, and with every new piece of evidence, the jury's doubt evaporated. By the time the courtroom reached a verdict, Kingston's career meltdown felt irreversible, and his mother's legacy took an even darker turn given her history of fraud. For those present in the courtroom, the testimonies painted a picture of a calculated scheme orchestrated by 2 people who understood exactly how to manipulate trust. Observers noted the stark contrast between Kingston's once jovial public persona and his grim demeanor in court. Every fake bank transfer was another nail in a coffin of credibility he could never reopen. Janice Turner was no passive accomplice. She was described by the judge as the operator, fixer, and accountant. From lining up deliveries to forging paperwork, she appeared to have orchestrated each move with precision. Some of the trial's most emotional moments came when Kingston himself pleaded for her protection, showing that despite everything, a deep familial bond still existed. This was hardly Janice's first encounter with the law. During Kingston's teenage years, she'd already served time for bank fraud, suggesting a pattern of behavior that threatened to repeat itself. The moment authorities took her into custody, in plain sight of her son, drove home the tragic nature of this saga. No matter how many mistakes were made, watching your mother be escorted away in handcuffs is a heartbreak you never forget. For Kingston, the entire situation echoed the struggles of his childhood. A mother ensnared by legal troubles, a family on the verge of falling apart. The difference now was that he had the resources and fame to potentially steer clear of bad decisions, but instead, he became entangled in the very crimes that once put his family in dire straits. This mother-son fraud duo became a modern-day cautionary tale about how deeply family ties can shape and sometimes distort our lives. The court transcripts revealed that Janice was the central figure who meticulously juggled phone calls, bank statements, and any loose ends that needed tying up. Kingston might have been the recognizable face, but Janice's role was arguably the linchpin that made the entire operation tick. Some say she shielded her son from the grittiest parts of the scheme. Others believe she taught him to navigate deception from the beginning. It didn't take long for the public to chime in. On X, formerly known as Twitter, users posted threads dissecting every detail of the case, some in utter disbelief that the same guy who gave us fire burning and eeny meeny could fall so far. Memes surfaced almost immediately. References to "somebody call 911" replaced with "somebody call my lawyer" showcased a mix of humor and grim fascination. Reddit, always quick to dive deep, lit up with anecdotes about Kingston's past behavior, stories of unpaid bills, demands for freebies, and an alleged sense of entitlement that some had noticed well before the fraud scandal. While certain comments were laced with schadenfreude, others expressed genuine sadness, remembering how Kingston's feel-good music had once defined a summer for them. YouTube channels specializing in celebrity drama jumped on the news, racking up thousands of views discussing the intricacies of wire fraud and unearthing old interviews. In the midst of it all, a pocket of devoted fans tried to defend him, citing the harsh realities of his upbringing. Still, the dominant reaction was disappointment. It's one thing to fade away from the spotlight. It's another to end up in a federal courtroom with your mother, facing a possible 20-year sentence. Major entertainment blogs dissected the story from every angle, speculating on whether Kingston's alleged crimes were a last-ditch effort to maintain a facade of wealth. Some writers pointed to the bigger question of celebrity culture itself, how maintaining an image often leads to desperate measures once the money dries up. All in all, the online conversation turned Kingston into a cautionary example of fame gone wrong. With the guilty verdict already in place, all eyes now turn to July 11th, 2025, sentencing day. Wire fraud carries a maximum of 20 years per count, and Kingston was found guilty on multiple counts. Realistically, sentences often run concurrently, but even a fraction of that maximum could see him behind bars for a significant part of his life. His mother, with her prior offenses, faces an even grimmer outlook. Beyond prison time, the court may impose restitution, forcing them to repay the more than $1 million they allegedly owe in total. Considering the state of Kingston's finances, he hasn't had a charting single in years. Coming up with that money won't be easy. Even if by some chance they manage partial repayment, the damage to his reputation might be irreversible. Still, this might not be the end of Kingston's public journey. History shows that some celebrities return from prison to second acts, careers relaunched on the back of controversy. If he takes responsibility and shows genuine remorse, he might find a way to rebuild his brand in music or elsewhere. Yet the looming question remains. Will the public accept a comeback from someone who bilked businesses for luxury items and dragged his own mother into the fray? Legal analysts have also chimed in, pointing out that Kingston's defense strategy might continue through appeals, though success is unlikely given the volume of evidence. If the appeal fails and a lengthy sentence follows, it could be years before Kingston sees another recording studio. For those who once sang along to his summer anthems, the final outcome might serve as a stark reminder of how swiftly fortunes can change. When Sean Kingston burst onto the music scene, fans saw him as a beacon of hope, a young talent who overcame homelessness, hardship, and the incarceration of a parent. Now, that rise and fall arc has taken a devastating turn, offering a stark reminder that fame and fortune can vanish as quickly as they appear. The narrative that once celebrated his resilience has transformed into a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition, questionable finances, and moral missteps. From high-energy music videos to high-stakes courtroom battles, Kingston's journey is a testament to how past struggles can resurface if they're never truly dealt with. His mother's deep involvement shows the power of family bonds, for better or for worse. Their collective actions carry severe consequences, and no amount of chart success can shield you from the law once it catches up. Ultimately, the final verdict might shape Kingston's legacy more than any single hit record. Whether he'll emerge from this and rebuild or fade into obscurity behind prison bars remains to be seen. One thing is clear: when the sentence is handed down, it won't just be about punishing a crime. It'll be a historic moment in pop culture, forever tied to the name Sean Kingston. For some fans, the saga serves as a bittersweet reflection on how quickly a dream can unravel, leaving tangled webs of regret in its wake. The question lingering in everyone's mind is whether Kingston can ever regain the spark he once had. If he does return to the spotlight, it'll take more than catchy hooks to win back trust. Only time will reveal if this saga is truly the last page of his story, or just another cautionary tale in a complex and turbulent life.